Cashflow King with you today, and in today's episode we have Projection Lab and the week 3 winner of a $25 Amazon e-gift card for one of our premium subscribers. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. As always, we really appreciate it. We are now up to 87 countries, 1,321 cities. So thank you to everybody who is tuning into the show. Let's start off with the week 3 winner, and then we'll talk a little bit about Projection Lab. So week 3 winner, for the very first time, probably one of our longest running premium subscribers for, I'd say, probably close to 3 years now, is ODog. So congratulations to ODog for being the lucky winner of a $25 Amazon e-gift card. By the time this podcast goes live, you should already have that in your email inbox with the email you used when you signed up to become premium. So thanks for your support. We have one more week to go as far as that goes on the giveaway. So we gave away $100 in week 1. We were only supposed to give $25 a week, but we decided to splurge a little bit in the holiday spirit this year. So we did $100 week 1, $25 last week in week 2, $25 this week in week 3, and we have one more giveaway next week for one of our lucky premium subscribers. It's not too late, so if you're not premium and you want a chance to win, feel free to check out the link in your show notes today. All right, so that's pretty much it for the week 3 winner. Nice and short and sweet. What I want to spend some time talking about today is something that I came across pretty recently through essentially another podcast and somebody that's really big in the financial independence community. And I call it software, but technically I guess it's a web-based sort of application, if you want to think of it that way, kind of like, you would just use on your laptop, which is where I've been using it. And it's called Projection Lab. And I thought it was really, really interesting. You see, as many of you know, I work in the retirement services space, and so we have sort of our own software that we license, and different companies use different software programs for different things. And the one that we have works well for probably 95+% of people, and this is going to typically be catered towards your standard looking to retire at a quote-unquote normal retirement age, and people that are going to work or perhaps own a business and have a pretty straightforward situation. They're putting away dollars, maybe they have a retirement plan at work with an employer match, and they're trying to essentially retire someday. And a lot of the software that we use focuses on a very important aspect, which is retirement income planning. And it works just well, works fine for folks. What it doesn't do is, in my opinion, some of the more complicated things, many of which I actually want to use for myself, and that is to model things that the software is really not set up for. So, for example, those of you that have listened for a while know that we talk about real estate investing on this show from time to time. I'm also a real estate investor. I do single-family rentals. I also do passive syndications as a limited partner investor. And I have not found anything yet that pretty much, including Projection Lab, to be fair, and I'm going to talk about how great it is, and I really do think it's wonderful. I've actually subscribed recently myself to their premium version, and we'll talk about that. But I've not found anything that does absolutely everything that I want it to, and everybody uses something a little bit different. Some people may not use anything at all, and so I was looking for something where I could put in, like for me, for real estate related investments. And it does, I will say, Projection Lab does a really, really good job, especially with your typical vanilla rentals, right? So your single family rentals, maybe you have a small multifamily, something like that. And you can put all kinds of information in, from drilling down to property management expenses, what your property taxes and insurance are, rental increases over time. You name it, it can go in there. And a lot of times different software, including the one that we use at work, just doesn't have the capability to do that. So you are pretty much having to do a lot of you have to manipulate it quite a bit to get it to do what you want it to do. So I would have to model them, for example, as income streams over a period of time and mark it as rental income. But at the same time, from an expense standpoint, it's not as detailed, and it's not really picking up sort of a lot of the nuances that go along with it. So with this, if I go, for example, I'm going to log back into my account, and we'll talk about this. And obviously, this is going to be kind of difficult to pick up in an audio format. This would be much better, I guess, if we had it as a video or video podcast, but it is what it is. But if you take a look, and I go to the section that I want to here, give me a second to get there. Okay, and we're going to go to the planning section here. All right, so if I click on the real assets button, for example, I can put in, even for your primary residence, things like, what your loan balance is, what your interest rate is, your principal and interest payment. You can put in for taxes and insurance, home repair costs or estimated home repair costs. And the software is awesome because, it literally will show you, as you're putting those things in, how many years until that's paid off, assuming you're paying it according to schedule, for example. That's for your, for your primary. But it also does the same thing for your rentals. So I have my rentals in there, and I've put in, everything from the interest rate to the P&I payment, the value that I think the properties will appreciate each year, what the expense number is, you name it, it pretty much gets plugged in there. And I think it's called Sandkey. They have like a Sandkey chart when you go to their cash flow section that does a really good job of breaking everything out. And for anybody that's been on Reddit, and if you're part of any of those personal finance type of threads, you will see a lot of times people use this. It's kind of a multicolored, if you look up Sandkey, you'll be able to see what I mean, but it's kind of like a multicolored, essentially, I don't want to say picture because it's very dynamic and fluid and you can make changes to it, but it's showing you all your inflows, all your outflows, essentially where your cash flow is literally flowing, where it's coming from, where it's going to, whether that's debt pay down, certain expenses, tax withholdings, investments, savings, you name it. So it's really, really cool from that standpoint. But I do like the fact that I can do that. The other thing that I think is lacking in a lot of software that's out there is the ability to, everybody talks about, and we've talked about it on the show here before from a very high strategic level, doing things like partial Roth conversions. But when you actually want to go and model that out and say, well, what does that look like? And what if I made some changes to it? They have a module in there for Roth conversions, which is just fantastic. You can start at a certain point. So for example, one of the scenarios that I'm modeling is, okay, what happens if I retire at 50 and I start Roth conversions fairly heavily during the first 5 years from age 50 to 55, for example. And why would I do that? Well, I'm not going to have the income from work, presumably at that point. So I'm able to do those conversions and really do it at a time that makes sense to be able to do that. At the same time, I'm likely going to be living off of things like savings, taxable brokerage accounts, rental income, all of which are very tax favorable. And so you can model what that looks like, and then all of a sudden, you can ramp it up or down and say, okay, well, what happens if after 5 years that changes? And now, I'm going to be doing something different. So for example, in my scenario, I'm trying to set it up such that, okay, for 5 years, I'm going to do those conversions, and then starting at age 55, essentially, right? 50, 51, 52, 53, 54. So I've converted for 5 years. For those of you that are not all that familiar with Roth conversions, I think we've done podcasts where we've mentioned that before, especially with the backdoor Roth IRA. If you go back in the archives, you can find some of those. If you have any questions from a high level, you can email the show, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com, and happy to try to interact with you to bring some clarity to that. But with the Roth conversion principle, as long as it's been converted for at least 5 years, and every time you do a conversion, it's essentially its own tranche, right? So the money that I convert at 50, that Roth conversion principal is available to be withdrawn penalty-free 5 years later. The money I do at 51, same thing. 5 years later, that tranche of money, the principal, is able to be withdrawn without any sort of penalties. And so it essentially can model that in the software. And I've been in touch with them a fair amount. I've given some suggestions. We've kind of gone back and forth. They actually have a whole, I'm not really one to use Discord, but they have a whole Discord thing where you can get on there and pretty much interact with the developers and the people that work there and put in suggestions, and people vote on them, and they kind of get moved up or down on the hierarchy, which is pretty cool. But it can do some things that some of the other softwares out there can't do. And the other thing I really like about it more than anything, for anybody that is interested in any sort of somewhat quote-unquote early retirement or financial independence at a relatively early age or earlier than quote-unquote normal, this can do a great job of modeling that for you, and you can set different goals, priorities, milestones, however you want to think about it in here. And when you're looking at, your plan, you can see, and there's different ways to view it, but there's a bunch of little really helpful icons that, you can see, okay, this is when this happens. So for example, if I pull mine up, okay, so we have a pretty aggressive savings goal that I have a little icon of a piggy bank pops up. I put that in there as one of our cash flow priorities and one of our goals. And okay, in 2026, that goal will be met. And then if I continue, all of a sudden in 2027, there's a loan that gets paid off. And if I continue on from there, there's something else that happens in 2030. And so you're going to have different things, and you can make this, it's not strictly just for retirement planning, right? So if you have, like we do, a little one, and you want to look at, okay, when they start going to school, and what does that look like, and when does that happen? That's an icon that will pop up on here, start of education, right? If I wouldn't really suggest modeling this, but every now and then, and this comes up with clients, in my line of work, where they'll say, parents are sick, not doing very well, probably in the next couple of years, we're going to inherit, ballpark a certain amount of money. You can also add that into the plan, and there's an icon for that. So it's really, really cool. And quite frankly, it's almost too much for probably 99% of people. Like, you really have to be kind of a geek or nerd like myself that really wants to dig into this stuff. But you can see how things change over time. And, they have some information in here, for example, about if you looked at taxes and what your taxes could look like over a period of time. And so one of the things that a lot of people will notice is typically when you're working in your working years, your effective rate and your marginal rate is going to be higher a lot of times than when you're retired. But then for some people, the quote-unquote super savers, if you will, that invest quite a bit of money, that don't do something like partial Roth conversions, when they get quite a bit older and they have to start taking out their RMDs or required minimum distributions, oftentimes that spikes up again, and all of a sudden you can see your tax rate spike up again because you're being forced to withdraw money from those accounts, whether or not you need it, based on the rules that the IRS puts in place. And they've changed them several times, and they could continue to change those. But it's kind of cool to be able to see that, because a lot of times, including in my plan, you'll see a little bit of a lull between your quote-unquote retirement and when those RMDs kick on. And that's a great time to look at modeling, okay, strategic partial Roth conversions, and what does that do to things like your effective tax rate. And you can even see how that affects you at different ages. So for example, at one point I was doing some modeling in here, and I had Roth conversions starting pretty heavily, like I said, at 50, and then all of a sudden what I did was I had those continue. Well, all of a sudden at 65, and again, this could change, but typically when you're going to get on Medicare at age 65, if your income is over a certain threshold, then all of a sudden you have to deal with the income-related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMAA, right? That's something else that the software actually has in there. And for a split second, I thought, oh, well, shit, yeah, maybe I should ratchet that down, especially and try to get more done before age 65 than carrying it out that way to try to get rid of IRMAA. Now, for most people, depending on your financial situation, you may not have to worry about that. It's kind of a quote-unquote good problem to have. For most people, quite frankly, it's going to be a nuisance tax. It's not really going to be overly material or substantial. If you're having to pay IRMAA, chances are you have significant resources where you're doing just fine, and it's really not going to have a material impact to your lifestyle. But if you're able to model and shift some things around and do some things sooner, or change the numbers a little bit and mitigate that, then why not, And so that's something else that it does that I think is really, really cool. And so I could go on and on forever. There's a lot of videos. I don't know if we will get approved or not. Hopefully they're listening to this episode. So, hey, Projection Lab folks, if you're listening to this, we would love to partner with you and offer up to our listeners, an opportunity to get started with you, and that would help you guys out. It would help them out. It would help out the show. I don't know if our application will get approved or not, but we went ahead and submitted that. So appreciate the consideration if you're listening. But even if they don't approve us, we can still try to put some link. I don't think we'll have a link or an affiliate link by the time this goes live. I'm recording this on December 14th, so it's a Sunday. Although I will say, I didn't get an answer from last night. I spent quite a few hours on the Projection Lab for my own stuff, and I didn't get an email from them. But I have emailed, I think, a week or two ago on a Saturday, and their response time was amazing. I mean, I was getting emails back, and it was pretty helpful. And a lot of this is going to kind of be, this is for the DIY crowd, the do-it-yourself crowd, but there are plenty of helpful resources. They have YouTube videos, they have different articles that are on their site, and if you have some general or specific questions, they can also try to help you out via their email support, which again, I've gone back and forth with them a little bit on some things there, so that's been pretty helpful, and I appreciate that. So anyway, hopefully we'll get linked up with them, and we'll be able to get you guys a little bit of a discount, and earn something for the show. But if not, that's fine. Like I said, I personally signed up for it myself, and they have different packages, but I'm doing the one where you essentially pay annually, and you have access for a year. They also have like a lifetime option for those that want to make a very large payment up front. Most people probably want to poke around a little bit first, so you may not want to do that. They do have a 7-day free trial, which I took advantage of, which was nice, and then for the premium version. And then also there's the free version, so you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to do the premium version. If you want to just log in, run a couple scenarios, test it out. I think they call it the sandbox. Like, you can do that, and it's absolutely free to do that. But there's certain features that you won't have full access to. The big thing too is once you spend the time to enter your information in, it's not going to save that, I don't think, for the free version. So just keep that in mind, because you can spend, and I've already spent hours and hours on this stuff, and you can run different scenarios. But there's just so much to it. Like I said, it's almost too much. So you just got to start with kind of the basics. But one of the things that you'll want to spend time on up front in making sure that you're entering in and it's accurate is your information. So things like your investments and your cash position, and if you want to put real estate in there, there's a section called, which I think is really cool, cash flow priorities, right? So you have a situation where, let's say, one person, or if you're married and both people are working, you have two people, two incomes coming into the household, and you're like, all right, we want to, fill in the blank. We want to hit X number of dollars in our emergency fund, and we don't want it to dip below that. And once that happens, we want to make sure that we are, investing X number of dollars into, our Roth IRAs. Maybe we want to max those out, and then blah, blah, and then whatever's left goes into, for example, a taxable brokerage account. However you want to set that up, right? You can do that in there, and it will literally show you how many of those goals have been met successfully. And I think they also call some of them abandoned goals. So if you don't have enough cash flow coming in to do all the things that you want to do, there might be some years where they kind of fall under abandoned goals, where they're not able to be successfully met. So that's another thing, excuse me, that's kind of interesting. But overall, I think it's really good for running different scenarios. So if you want to run, hey, retire at 50 versus retire at 55 versus, whatever you are looking for in your own life, I think it can be helpful. So for anybody that's ever used, like back in the day, I think it's taken over now by Empower, but it used to be Personal Capital, and you could put in your information, and I used to use this quite a bit to track your net worth, and it had an interesting interface there. That's definitely a component of this where you can track that and see what that looks like. So even under current finances, when I click on that, I can see my net worth in a very large circle on the left, and then there's some smaller circles that, what comprises that, what are your assets, what are your liabilities. There's different sections. You can click on each section and kind of see what that looks like. And the biggest thing, which I've never been a fan of, and I know Personal Capital and now Empower, I believe, still do this. Mint back in the day used to do this. I'm not sure about Monarchs out there. I don't use Monarch, but I don't know if they do this or not. But a lot of these, packages out there, they want you to put in your credentials for your information, like if you're logging into a bank account or an investment account or a retirement account or whatever, and they will do kind of a screen scrape and pull that information in. Projection Lab does not do that, which I'm really happy about. And what I personally do, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, is I keep like a Google sheet to track different things, and one of those is just our balance sheet. So I can see, okay, what are the assets, what are the liabilities, what's personal, what's business, whatever. And it has all that information pretty handy. So I would say if you're organized, and if not, you may want to get organized before you start, poking around with the software. But you can literally put in, okay, here's what that account looks like. Here's the balance. Here's the type of account that it is. Who owns this account, so on and so forth. And then there's even ways in here, it's probably beyond the scope of our show today, but you can get into, typical allocations. You can make assumptions for, from a deterministic forecasting standpoint, you can make assumptions for rates of return, for inflation, you name it, you can do it. There's also some features they have on here where you can just use historical returns. So you can say, okay, well, what are the historical returns of this, right? If you're utilizing bonds or fixed income, there's a way to indicate that. If you're not, like myself, we have extremely small allocation to virtually, no fixed income. And I've talked about this before, how I view rentals, and that is a fixed income component, and that's kind of a separate conversation. But anyway, you can indicate, hey, no bonds in the portfolio, right? So it won't include any of those assumptions. So it's just really cool. It's as customizable as you want it to be. But think of it like a net worth snapshot dashboard. It can do that. That's a very small part of it. It also, if you update it at different times. So for example, one thing I plan to start doing with this is every time I update our spreadsheet in terms of the balance sheet, and it recalculates the net worth, usually, and I could save a copy, which I thought about starting to do, but I may not now because of the software, where I can it just overrides what's already in there. But if you want to take a look back at a snapshot in time and say, hey, when I did this 6 months ago, here's where my net worth was, here's what that looked like, and now I'm updating this 6 months later or 1 year later or whatever the time frame is, and it will actually plot for you. They have a little section called Progress where it will plot where your net worth is, and you can kind of see how you're tracking. Also a very cool feature, also in my opinion a very small part of this. Where the real value is, in my opinion, is going to be on the plans that you can create and the scenarios that you can run and all the detail that you can get into as far as that goes. I mean, it's unlike any software that I've seen. I know there's others out there, some of which I've not used, so I'm not going to say it's the be-all, end-all. But for the average do-it-yourselfer person that doesn't have access to other software, that wants to get in the weeds and play around with some of this stuff, especially for the price point that it's at, I think it's extremely affordable and well worth it. Now, the other thing I got from them after I signed up recently was that their premium option is going up, I believe, at the end of December in a couple of weeks. So for those of you that want to kick the tires and test it out, you may want to do that sooner rather than later. And that way there, if you do like the Projection Lab enough to go premium, you can lock in the lower price before they raise the price. I'm hoping, again, that our application gets approved, and maybe we can put a link in the show notes to maybe get a little bit of a discount or something like that on there. But that's kind of what we're looking at. So, I mean, I guess this is kind of sort of like a Projection Lab commercial, but it's something that I've been playing around with, and quite frankly, I've stayed up late on several different occasions, kind of messing around with it and really looking at different scenarios and the whole Roth conversion thing. And actually texted a couple of my advisor buddies last night to ask them what they use, and one of them didn't respond, but the other one, he had a couple of other different things. But anyway, I sent him the information. I was like, hey, dude, like, you need to check this out. This is pretty cool. So, I think it's a good thing for anybody, again, especially people that have a either non-traditional or you just want more than the typical, hey, I'm this old, I make this much, I'm contributing whatever, I'm going to retire at this point, and I want to make sure I'm going to be okay by traditional retirement age. Nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of different software out there that does that. But if you really want to dig in and you want to get into the weeds on the taxes, and they actually have a Monte Carlo functionality built in to the system here where you can model, probability of success, which I think is pretty cool. Instead of just strictly using a deterministic forecast and assuming that the markets are essentially going to go up at a certain percentage every single year. We all know that doesn't happen, right? There's going to be times where there's favorable conditions, unfavorable conditions, and if you want to be able to model that sort of in the Monte Carlo fashion, there's a way to do that within the plan. So I'm not going to say that it's perfect. It's not. I again have gone back and forth with them on a couple different things. There's one thing now with the Roth conversions that I'm in talks with them about as far as getting it to do exactly what I want it to do. However, I will say for something, again, that's either free if you want the free version, or at the price point that the premium version's at is pretty much, I wouldn't say a steal, but it's extremely reasonable. And I've spent a lot more money on a lot crazier things. So I'm gonna, keep my premium subscription for the year. I paid it up for the year. We're gonna test it out and continue to play with it and see how we like it, and then we can always reevaluate. I will say the other thing that's kind of nice is you can read more about it, but they started off as kind of like a side project. The guy who started this, I guess, was a software developer person who kind of wanted to build it for himself, and it started as a side project and all of a sudden kind of morphed into this essentially business now. But they are not like a big publicly traded company or anything like that. They're not trying to upsell you on, managing your money or anything like that. It's strictly funded by people like us, like me, and many others that pay for the software to keep them going. That's how they earn their money. That's where they earn their money. So, and it's pretty cool because you can see they've released, and there's a couple of update videos I need to watch. There's a couple different versions that have come out even in the past, I think 3 or 4 months, where they're taking feedback from the users, like us, in terms of what we would like to see and different features and functionality that we would want built into the software. So I think it's really good that they're open to that, and you kind of essentially, I don't want to say they work for us. That sounds weird, but they are financially supported by people that pay and subscribe to the premium version of their software or their app or whatever you want to call it. I keep saying software. To me, I look at it as software, but it's basically a web-based interface that has all this functionality. So it's pretty cool. All right, and again, 99% of people, it's going to be overkill. It's going to be way too much. But even if you're one of those that, maybe you don't want to get super in the weeds, but you want to try to model a couple things, maybe you just kick it around and use the free version and see how you like it. I'm sure there's functionality. Every time I watch one of their YouTube videos, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't realize that was there, or oh, I overlooked that option within that menu. I need to go back in there and play with that a little bit. So I feel like every time I'm looking at some of their stuff, I'm learning something new and something different, and you can continue to evolve with it. I'm used to the software that we use, and I know that like the back of my hand, but this is new to me, so a lot of the same concepts and such, but you can get a lot more granular and detailed and nuanced with this than you can with some of the other software that's out there. So anyway, I think it's a really cool thing for those that are interested. Again, for other people, it's going to be like nails on a chalkboard, and you're going to have zero interest in this, and that's totally fine. But for those that are, again, check out Projection Lab, check out our show notes, and hopefully if our affiliate application gets approved, we'll have something in there for you guys. And if it doesn't, then you can either search it up on your own, or if I can find, I think I was able to get a promo code for it, even though they told me they didn't have one. I was able to find one. There's actually 2 out there that I know of, and we'll see if we can put that in there for you. But check it out. Any questions, email the show, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Once again, congratulations to ODOG. We will do our week 4 drawing next week, and happy Sunday. See you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.